together. To innovate for the benefit of humanity and to inspire the world through discovery.
And here we go.
Good afternoon, and welcome to NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. I'm Bethany Stevens, and we are here today to provide a status update on the historic first crewed test flight of the Orion spacecraft post-lunar flyby. On our panel today, we have NASA Administrator Isaacman, Dr. Lori Glaze, head of Artemis, Rick Hinfling, Artemis II Flight Director, Kelsey Young, Artemis II Lunar Science Lead. We'll start with opening remarks from each of the briefers before opening it for questions in the room and on the phone bridge. If you're on the phone, press *1 to submit your question. When called upon, please state your name, affiliation, and to whom you'd like to direct your question. With that, I will hand the floor to Administrator Isaacman for his remarks.
Thanks, Bethany. It's been an exciting Artemis II mission so far, and a very eventful 24 hours as the crew surpassed the Apollo 13 distance record, 252,756 miles from Earth. They relayed observations from the lunar surface. They've captured some incredible imagery. They performed a ship-to-ship call with their colleagues on the International Space Station. They performed additional manual piloting of the Orion spacecraft. They've been working at a reduced cabin pressure of 10.5 psi in support of future integrated lander operations, and they did take a call from the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. There were millions of viewers on that tuned in for that historic broadcast, and it concluded with the President promptly inviting the astronauts to visit the Oval Office. Now, Integrity left the lunar sphere of influence earlier this morning, so they're now approximately 229,000 miles from Earth. It will splash down Friday evening, approximately 8:07 p.m. Eastern Time, and the recovery weather is so far looking favorable. Now you can see some of the spectacular images the crew have captured here on our screen. Now, this is the first time humans have documented some parts of the far side of the moon. Now, these images will be publicly available on NASA's website, our digital platforms, and the White House actually released the now iconic EarthSat photo from earlier today. Now, these are the first of many incredible images of the moon, and we'll continue to release them as they become available. My understanding from a few minutes ago is that they captured over 175 gigabytes of imagery from the lunar pass alone just yesterday, and the images that you are seeing right now have been transmitted back to Earth predominantly through optical communication. It's pretty cool stuff. Now, before I turn the call over to Dr. Lori Glaze, I wanted to share some of the other things that we are doing at NASA while the Artemis II crew are underway on the historic mission. So the crew on the International Space Station are hard at work. They're undertaking the science and tech demos, many of which have directly supported the Artemis program mission, continue to do so. The Exploration Ground System personnel, if you want a quick Kennedy Space Center update here, have been out at the launch pad. The crawler, my understanding, is approaching the outer gate and expect ML1 to be back in the assembly building within approximately a week. Now, this would cut down on the turnaround time that we observed from Artemis 1, measured in months, several months. On the science front, my understanding is the Blue Origin Mark 1 lunar lander is wrapping up here at the Johnson Space Center in Chamber A. Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope testing is progressing, so much so that we feel reasonably confident we're going to announce a target launch date this year sometime in the next 2 weeks. In aeronautics, we've been flying the X-59 almost daily while the Artemis II mission has been underway. Work to rebuild our X-plane portfolio. The first senior level Artemis III mission design discussion today. Teams are working with vendors on moon-based RFIs and RFPs, and we are advancing the Skyfall scientific payload for the first interplanetary nuclear-powered spacecraft, SR-1 Freedom. I think the most important point we're trying to make here is we can launch history-making missions like Artemis II, start making meaningful progress towards Artemis III, and do all the other important programs that we've been waiting for NASA. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Glaze.
Thank you, Jared. I just have to say, wow, when I look at all of those images that we're scrolling by. I hope all are as inspired as I am. I know they continue to be downloaded. they're just absolutely stunning, and we really hope that they are inspiring truly everyone in the world. As the crew surpassed their record for the farthest distance, as Jared just mentioned, they traveled on the far side of the moon. They offered some compelling words, and I love this. They said they challenged this generation and the next to make sure that this record is not long-lived, and I love that because we have big plans to go not just back to the moon on a regular basis, but beyond. And then, of course, while it's been really exciting here the last couple of days, as we've been watching all of the activity in Orion, we still have to ensure that Reed, Victor, Christina, and Jeremy return home safely on Friday evening. So we're pretty focused on that now, making sure that they get home safely. I will just say a couple of things about yesterday's operations. Really provided a great opportunity to test how our flight operations team and our science teams are working together in real time with the crews at the moon. And in fact, from my perspective, one of my favorite things about watching all of the amazing data that was flowing down yesterday is thinking about how so much of NASA is working together in order to enable all of what you're seeing. All right, better stop exercising. But as I was saying, what's really great to see everybody working together. So I think about our exploration programs that are supporting our transportation systems like Orion, working with our flight operations and our flight directors, all of the ground teams that are supporting, including the science team supported by the Science Mission Directorate, thinking about our crew that are actually performing the work, and then the payloads that have been provided that they're using. So everything that you're looking at isn't just, it's not just the pretty pictures, it's a huge chunk of NASA working together to enable that. All of this information that we're gathering is really going to help refine how we plan our future mission to the lunar surface. I'll just say that our flight operations team continues to fly Orion and put it through its paces as the crew and the spacecraft make their way home. And the mission isn't over yet. We do continue to learn from how our spacecraft and our crew are operating together in space. We continue with several of the science activities that are focused on the crew health and life in space. So still a lot of things going on. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Rick so he can share some of the operational details.
Thank you, Lori. The administrator touched on a few of the operations that the crew's been up to recently, but I'll fill in a few of the other details of interest. Since we last met Sunday evening, the crew performed the first orbital trajectory correction maneuver, outbound trajectory correction maneuver number 3. It was 10.4 feet per second. The burn duration was 19 seconds, and we used our auxiliary thrusters on the surface module. Obviously, yesterday was the big day with flyby, and I'll save all those details for Kelsey, but we had some really poignant remarks from the crew, and I can assure you there wasn't a dry eye in mission control when the naming of the 2 craters announced by Jeremy. As part of the lunar flyby, the crew made their pass closest to the moon, flying at 3,138 miles per hour relative to the surface of the moon. And now they're on their way making their march back home to Earth. We bid a temporary goodbye to the moon earlier today at 1:23 p.m. Eastern Time. That's the milestone where we exited the lunar sphere of influence, and we're back under the control of Earth's gravity. As for today's operations, we had a couple of public affairs events. The crew is going to have, each of them will have a conference with their family members. We'll have some routine medical checks. And then in the evening, we're going to perform the first return trajectory correction maneuver. It will be 1.3 feet per second. It'll last about 15 seconds, and we're going to use the service module reaction control system thrusters that burn. We expect that burn to occur about 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Finally, I'll conclude my remarks with acknowledging that the USS John P. Murtha has left port and has started steaming out the midway point for the recovery of Integrity and her crew later on Friday. That's all for today's operations update, so I'll hand it over to Kelsey.
Spirits are very high. We did what we set out to do. The lunar science team and the crew prepared extensively, as we talked about a couple days ago, for flyby, and I hope you all saw that yesterday during execution. We confirmed, as Lori mentioned, that we can, achieve science through orbital observations and through integrating science into flight operations. And as Rick just said, we left temporarily, and we're looking forward to integrating all these lessons learned in future missions. I can't conclude remarks without diving into science detail, so forgive me just a couple deep dives. Impact flashes. Over a 30-minute observation period, and this was largely during that time of the eclipse, crew observed several impact flashes. We did have citizen scientists here on Earth also looking for flashes, and I know that the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter team is hard at work trying to identify evidence of those impact flashes that the crew observed. I did have a chance to have the post-flyby crew conference with the crew this morning, and we asked a lot of follow-ups on those impact flashes. Impact flashes are caused by micrometeorite impacts hitting the moon, and they really help tell us about the dynamic lunar environment, which is, of course, also important when we think about future missions. I don't know if I expected to have the crew see any on this mission, so you probably saw the surprise and shock on my face. And though I was not in the science evaluation room, I heard that there were audible screams of delight. So, very excited science community. You've heard me talk a lot about the importance that human explorers bring to scientific exploration, especially around observations of color. And so I'm sure all of you, like I was really awaiting if they saw any other colors other than black, white, and shades of gray. Heard that they did indeed. Right away, they started describing the green around Aristarchus Plateau and different brown hues. And these colors really help tell us nuances about the chemistry of lunar material, especially the greens around Aristarchus. That was exciting. That's something that we can all see from here on Earth. And so I encourage you all to go out and look at the moon tonight and look for Aristarchus and imagine those green hues that the crew members saw. You heard a lot of discussion, especially from our pilot, Victor Glover, about the Terminator, which really, to our mind, highlighted the benefits and also the challenges for future surface operations. The lighting conditions along the Terminator that the crew experienced yesterday do mimic, in many ways, the lighting conditions of the South Polar region. The low sun angles, the dramatic lighting causing, the extreme shadowing, and illumination also accentuating topography. This is really important for our agency's future moon base plans and understanding how crew member observation can contribute to future mission planning. And finally, the Artemis 2 crew, in a very poignant moment, offered proposed names for two unnamed craters in the moon's eastern hemisphere. Crater Integrity for their vehicle and Crater Carol for Commander Wiseman's late wife. I think we have a picture. Yeah, thank you. Upon return, the crew does plan to submit these to the International Astronomical Union as consideration for official names. There was, as Rick said, not a dry eye in the house. Really poignant moment that we were really glad to observe them describing. And with that, I think we can take questions.
Yep, we will open the floor and take questions, and my colleague Will over here will pass along the mic. We can start with you, Jackie.
Thanks so much. Jackie Waddles with CNN. I don't think there was a dry eye on Earth when Carol Crater was named. I was just curious, was aware that was going the crew do? Curious if there was any discussions and they were kind of looking for the crater or kind of how that came about. And then really quickly, I also wanted to just check on a toilet status update. We heard this morning that I thought I heard some chatter around it being considered, a reentry now. Like, is the toilet out of commission? Get back, or where does that stand? Thanks.
Take the second.
Okay. Yes, I know the crew put a lot of, obviously, thought and pre-planning into what you heard yesterday. It is my understanding that he was there prior to yesterday.
And the toilet remains operational. The challenge that we're working through is evacuating the wastewater tank. The vent is a lot less than we were expecting, and so we're having to fall back to some other alternate means other than the toilet. But what you overheard on the space to ground or on the Orion Earth channel this morning was us deferring some maintenance on the toilet. Typically, when you have 4 crew members using it throughout the day, nominally, you have to do a maintenance activity once a day. And with a lower use rate, we're not able to vent the wastewater products. We don't need to do the maintenance as often. So that's what that exchange was.
Thanks. I thoughts with aviation. I'm over here. Jared, that's a pretty impressive and full portfolio of missions you outlined that NASA is involved in now. And without getting you in trouble with your boss, are you going to be able to defend an $18.8 billion budget, $5.6 billion for 27, or are you prepared to kind of work with Congress to see if the administration will support more? Thank you.
I will like to keep the focus on what we were speaking about today, and then on to other questions like that at a later date, and keep the focus on the mission. Thank you.
Mark Strassman, CBS. I feel as though I've talked to about 10 people off campus today, and they wanted to ask me if those remarkable images. And so they asked me, so I'm going to ask you. Have you seen anything in those images that surprised you? And what about those images touched you?
Sure. Oh my gosh. When I woke up this morning, I've spent most of my morning just flipping through the thousands of images that have started to come down. And there is something in every image that surprises me, right? I mean, you might think that after looking at hundreds of images taken of the lunar surface, I would get sick of it. I have not, nor do I anticipate getting sick of it. It's just their experience and the amount of time and the rate at which they were moving. Every vantage point is different. You heard them audibly describe yesterday, wow, I'm looking at the same feature as I was 10 minutes ago and it looks different, right? And the images reflect that. And so, when I see these images, I connect to each one in a different way, especially in light of what we heard from the crew yesterday. I think as a geologist by training, I love looking at the pictures of the lunar surface, but I think certainly emotionally a lot of us have connected with the images of Earth, the images from during the eclipse, with the images from the vehicle cameras taking pictures of the moon during the eclipse period. And while they are inspirational and I think allow all of us to, really feel a little bit of what they were feeling, there's also a lot of science hidden, inside of those images. And I can tell you that right now, as we speak, there is a science evaluation room full of several dozen scientists who are already getting going on those images. Just as one example, there was a healthy scientific debate this morning about some of those images taken during the eclipse period and what we can see of the solar corona and what we can see of zodiacal light. So the conversations and the science lessons learned are just beginning.
Here with the Epoch Times. Thanks so much for taking the time. For Jared, as we saw with Artemis 2 going around, having that very characteristic blackout of when they go around the moon. How much longer are missions to the moon going to have that as we develop a moon base? And where do, say, communication satellites in lunar orbit land on priority list?
Yeah, I'd say, people have asked quite a bit about elevated blood pressure when we were Outcom with Orion on the far side of the moon. We have comm missions in LEO relatively routinely, certainly operators trained for it, our astronauts do as well. But in terms of the bigger picture, can we do better? For sure. Right? We've talked about prioritizing observation and comm relay satellites for lunar operations so we can bring the world along with us as we build out a moon base. And I think I was in a meeting not that long ago where we described it as if not the platinum age for commercial communication capabilities, certainly the golden age. We're very close. So we have a number of providers that are all investing heavily in the kind of capabilities that we can take advantage of in LEO, cislunar space, and I have no doubt in lunar orbit ahead.
K for Interstellar Gateway. Thanks for doing these. It's really cool. Jared, question for you. Can you speak on the responsibility of what being the administrator during such a pivotal moment means? And secondly, I'm speaking on behalf of musicians around the world and bands. I have a band called Chasing Satellites, and will there be potentially an opportunity to submit music for a future Artemis mission for the wake-up calls? That was really cool to be a part of and to watch as a musician.
Certainly. So I think I've described before that I thought that certainly felt a lot more pressure, being on the outside and responsible for a human spaceflight mission than being in the vehicle itself, especially a mission such as Artemis 2, which kicks off so many other exciting ones to follow, is learn to build that enduring presence, to learn so that we can undertake even grander missions, as Dr. Glaze referenced, on the moon in the future. So I think it is a great responsibility, but you derive confidence from all the expertise that exists within NASA, the workforce, our commercial, our international partners that come together for a moment like this, all the testing that goes into it, and the fact that we have this playbook before and we're running it. Now, in terms of contributions for music and future wake-up music for subsequent missions, I hope we're running so many missions to and from the future that have to cast a very wide net for creative content.
For Administrator Isaacman, Tom Costello with NBC News. I'm just wondering, how are you feeling now? I realize we don't have the crew home yet, but you've had a very successful trip around the far side. How are you about this setting the stage, testing out the vehicle for a lunar landing as soon as 2028?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd say for this mission, we're certainly off to a good start. I mean, and the vehicle has been doing, made commentary early on that I like that we're talking about water access valves and cabin temperature and even plumbing issues for that matter, for all the things that we could have been potentially talking about prior to the mission. But I'll breathe easy, get through re-entry, and everybody's undershirt and in the water. In terms of getting ready for the subsequent missions, it's kind of why I picked some of the words that I did at this press event, is that a lot of people's rightful attention right now on the crew of Artemis 2, especially here at JSC and Mission Control, especially the recovery forces that are now making their way out to bring this crew back to their family. And for everybody else, we've got the other things to get done, including thinking about Artemis 3. It's why I was very happy that the crawler is making its way out to 39B right now. That we've got a timeline to get it back in the VAB, ideally in a week. That would cut down on the turnaround, I think, by 3 months compared to Artemis 2. So we can undertake, again, world-changing missions like Artemis 2 right now and get ready for the next one.
Hi, Josh Dinner, Space.com. This mission revealed anything about life aboard Orion, crew workload, flights in deep space, or maybe something unexpected that will shape how NASA and Artemis crew approach preparing for future missions?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. We've learned a tremendous amount as part of a lot of the flight test subjective activities we've been doing. I think we have a couple of problems that we still need to work out, but Orion has been shown itself to be a very capable capsule for beyond Earth orbit space travel. And I think the things like, as the administrator talked about, the things that we're going to have to improve upon for Artemis 3 are relatively small and incremental in nature, as opposed to wholesale redesigns of spacecraft subsystems. So overall, I'm extremely pleased with the performance of the spacecraft and how it's served as a campsite for our 4 crew members.
We'll go from Marcia to Eric and then do a couple on the phone bridge.
Did it press for Dr. Young? Hard for me to know how quickly these pictures are coming down. How many do you estimate that have come down so far of the moon? And these luminous flashes on the surface, is that an actual meteor star, do you think, or is it just your usual business of falling debris?
Yeah, so the team, the FOD team, hard to bring down the images as fast as they can. Of course, we also have other vehicle data that needs to come down as well. But the team is working really hard to try to get those down and of course, get them out to you guys as well. As of the time I left console roughly an hour ago, there was just over 50 gigabytes of data from yesterday that had come down. Of course, every image does not exactly have the moon in it, but it is taken from within the lunar observation period. So we're working really hard to get those down, as well as the audio files that the crew were taking. That's a really rich scientific data set because it captures the nuance of what the crew were seeing. We heard a few per hour in those science situational reports you were yesterday, but there are multiple hours of recordings of science observations, about 2/3 of which we've been able to get down so far, and our team has already been looking at that, those couple hours of transcripts and audio files. As for the impact flashes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we think they saw at least 4 and possibly up to 6 impact flashes. Again, I talked to them about that just this morning in the crew conference with them. I think, it's very early to tell, right? This happened less than 24 hours ago. Our teams are looking at it now, and spacecraft like the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter will be really helpful to try to help us narrow in on that. But the lunar environment is a dynamic place, and we have a lot to learn about it. LRO has returned a lot of information about the lunar environment, but observations like this are a critical part of our understanding, which will pay dividends for exploration.
Eric Berger, Ars Technica. Question maybe for Jared. So why haven't we been back to the moon in 53 minutes? You brought up the Artemis 3 mission design. Can you bring up or talk about the 2 or 3 hardest problems that you're tackling? You talked about the mission design meeting today, but the 2 or 3 hardest problems you're tackling right now to make sure that launches next year.
So I don't want to get too far out in front of a mission underway right now. I would just say that there are a lot of things based on the information we have available today from feedback from our vendors that we know are achievable. And I think one of the questions probably will just be what the initial orbit will be for Artemis 3. Is it going to be LEO or GEO? I think that we're all going to have some sense of which one, and there's pros and cons for each of them for sure. We're all going to be able to have some sense about which path we'll likely go down based on launch cadence of our 2 HLS providers, both of which have launches coming up, I would say, in the next month or less right now. So a big key to our strategy, not just to return to the moon, but to stay and to build a base, is going to be rapid reusability of heavy lift vehicles. So the more they get experience doing that, the more options that are available for us for Artemis 3. But I'd say right now, we certainly have a good plan for that mission that will help us buy down a lot of risk in advance of the landing for Artemis 4 in 28.
Jeff Faust with Space News.
Jeff Faust with Space News. Question for Dr. Young. Now that you are going to get all of these images and verbal descriptions, annotations, what's the plan for the science team days and weeks ahead to go through all of that data and see how they and science objectives that you laid out for them? Thank you.
Oh my goodness, what a good question. We have a lot of data to get through. Like I said, it has already started. We had teams working overnight, after the crew went to sleep, as soon as we started getting data down. I will reiterate that we will be getting all mission data relevant to lunar science archived and made publicly available within 6 months post splashdown. So these are all of the images of the moon, these audio files, and even the annotations. But in the meantime, over those next 6 months, we're also going to be preparing 2 reports that we also owe to be publicly released within 6 months post-mission. One is a science operations report that describes, how our team is structured to integrate flight operations to accomplish our objectives. But relevant to your question, the second one is a post-mission preliminary lunar science report. And so we are going to be going objective by objective with those 10 lunar science objectives you referenced, looking across this entire, really rich, robust, but very large data set, and really trying to understand what data we got relevant to each objective, but set up the community for success so that they can access those data and help us answer these fundamental driving science questions. You know, the lunar science team for this mission, it was our charter to develop the objectives and to maximize the science value out of this mission. We'll be doing an initial assessment over 6 months, and then the community is able to do with these data.
We'll move to Ken Chang with the New York Times.
Thank you. So I have some questions about the optical communication. How was the performance like? How many gigabytes was spent? What was the data rate? How does that compare with what was expected? And how does it compare with the usual way of sending data back? And it seems like it's been almost operational already and not just a test. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the question was relative to some of the data rates for the optical communication system. I'll just give you a stat from overnight that we heard from Console. We got 20 gigabytes down in a little more than 45 minutes. That's orders of magnitude more than we get our S-band telemetry system. So optical comm has been working really well, and hopefully we can take what we learned on Artemis 2 and expand its operational capability and its implementation for future missions.
And now we will move to Lauren Grush with Bloomberg.
Out to me yesterday was just the vivid descriptions that the crew used for what they were seeing and how they remained in kind of constant contact and talkative throughout the flyby. I'm wondering if it's possible to say how that might have compared to the Apollo crew observations and how that robustness impacted the science and the data that was collected.
Absolutely. I mean, probably a lot of people watching have spent a lot of time looking back at Apollo and maybe watching Apollo in real time online and living what the Apollo crews, not just on the surface, but in orbit experienced. You have, I'm sure, heard the Apollo descriptions of the lunar surface from orbit, and they were also really impactful. They trained heavily in geology and orbital observations, just like the Artemis 2 crew did. I will say, listening to the level of scientific discourse that the crew was having yesterday was incredibly inspiring. I mean, a testament to how much they prepared before this mission. You know, I heard a couple times Christina and Victor especially saying, when we took the time to actually talk to each other about a specific target that we were both seeing, we elevated each other. We elevated what we were able to pull out of that target. You know, more brains on a scientific target are better than one, and we heard from them directly multiple times that they were helping each other to advance their scientific understanding of what they were looking at. We actually also heard them say, hey, we have a hypothesis. Can you guys provide guidance on that hypothesis, like right now in the middle of our flyby? So the science team was saying, you know, was cross-checking what they were seeing, was reading up geologic ages of major lunar impact features, and it was informing the observations they were making during the flyby. I mean, this is absolutely everything we hoped for by integrating science into flight operations, you know, because, again, science enables exploration and exploration enables science. And the fact that, you know, they're giving observations and, you know, I was able to immediately follow up on those observations with, you know, just the quick questions that can enhance science return. It meant that they were evaluating and buying down multiple working hypotheses in real time during their flyby. And just imagining the future when we have crew on the surface for short duration missions and ultimately the moon base, the amount of science we are able to gain when, you know, science is woven into this operational fabric is incredibly impactful. And we saw that, you know, for 7 straight hours yesterday.
Now we'll move to Micah Maidenberg with the Wall Street Journal.
Hey, good afternoon. For Rick, what is the approximate time on Friday when the module separates from the service module, if you have that on hand? You know, the administrator mentioned splashdown is expected for around 8:07 Eastern. And then any color on the entry prep work ahead for the crew and mission control between now and Friday? Thanks.
Sure. I'll start with some of the times. The crew module and service module separation is going to occur about 20 minutes before entry interface. So that separation will be at 7:33 p.m. Eastern Time. We expect entry interface about 7:50 p.m. Eastern Time, with a splashdown around 8:06 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday. As for the preparations that the ground and the astronauts are doing today to prepare for entry, or today and future days, a lot of it is all of the science equipment and cameras and tablets and reference material that got unstowed in support of the flyby. Well, we have to put that all away. We have to pack up our suitcases and get ready to come home. And that takes time. And so we are laying out a plan to make sure that the crew gets everything packed away in time to get their suits on and get in their seats to perform that final trajectory correction maneuver on splashdown day and come home.
We'll move back in the room to Joey and then on to Will.
Thanks. Joey Roulette with Reuters. I just had another quick toilet question. Do you have any idea as to why the venting is not happening as fast as you hope it is? And what other hardware on the spacecraft might that implicate, or what other problems might that cause?
Yeah, so the engineering team is going to go through a full fault tree to identify all of the potential causes of the blockage. Initially, you may have recalled that we thought it might be icing up at the nozzle at the outer mold line of the spacecraft. We have pretty high confidence that it's not an icing condition. We've put the spacecraft in a sun-focused attitude to bake off any ice. We've activated heaters along the lines internal to the spacecraft, and we still see a blockage. And so the latest theory is related to some of the chemistry that goes into ensuring that the wastewater doesn't develop any biofilms. And there may be something going on with a chemical reaction where there's some debris that's generated as part of that reaction, and it's getting clogged in a filter. But again, we don't have root cause, and once we get the spacecraft back into the processing facility in Florida, we'll be able to get access to all the components and do a real detailed fault tree to identify the root cause.
Hi, Will Robinson-Smith with Spaceflight Now. Thank you all for taking the time. Going back to Dr. Young's point about the intersection of science and exploration, to both Dr. Young and to Dr. Glaze, given the number of believed to be impact flashes that the crew observed during just a relatively brief amount of time, I wonder how these observations and the ones made previously by LRO will factor into creating the conditions for a moon base that can allow the astronauts to stay safe, given the probability that they may experience a micrometeoroid impact at that site. Thank you.
Well, I do think that the data that we're collecting with these observations, and as you noted, the LRO data that we're continuously collecting, we have been for quite a while, all of that is being fed into our plans and making sure that we understand what all of the variety of risks are. There's many that we're looking at, and of course micrometeorites being one, as we start to establish infrastructure on the surface and understanding those rates. These kind of data really help inform us as far as what we can anticipate. And of course, the different parts of the moon, down at the South Pole, maybe a little slightly different rates than we would see higher up at higher latitudes. So we need to compile all of those data and understand what those impacts might be.
Hi, I'm Nick Notori with ABC 13. Question about the scientific stuff that you found yesterday. I know the question was asked about what was inspirational. I talked to Joe Kearns yesterday, and he had told me, I'm just looking at his quote, as a scientist, I can tell you what's most inspirational is when you're pouring through something you're working on and you realize you're seeing something that nobody else has ever seen before. I know you talked about the impact flashes, but is there anything else that no one else has seen before that you guys have already saw? And then also explain to us on Earth that maybe this is high level over our heads, how what was photographed or taken yesterday could maybe give us some answers on our planet of Earth.
Thank you. Lovely questions. I might just give a specific example of something I heard from the crew yesterday. My background's in geology and specifically impact cratering. Every time they describe those beautiful basins, I get really excited. They did describe Ohm Crater a couple of different times, and they noticed a variety of different color and albedo hue associated not just with Ohm, but with the rays that extend out from the crater.
Sun's rising, though.
This could indicate, impactors.
What
impact
are
events
you
are really
doing in my swamp?
When's the in-sim Minecraft gameplay?
Oh no.
Oh gosh.
Hi, in-sim. They're kind of like a geology lead us to believe that that crater excavated from distinct depths below the surface of the moon. So it's those kinds of nuanced observations that can ultimately inform future landed missions, future crewed missions, to understand where can we go to maximize the scientific value. These ultimately get at chronology of the solar system, at how the inner solar system has evolved over time, which connects to, you know, the moon being the witness plate for our planet and for the inner solar system. You know, you heard Lori and I the other day get very excited about talking about, you know, pesky plate tectonics and oceans and vegetation that gets in the way of us looking at the early part of our planet's past, and the fact that that part of the record of our Earth-Moon system is still available on Earth. Well, where it's available is the highlands, the far side highlands, and the South Pole. Specifically, the South Pole has the South Pole Aitken Basin, which is my personal favorite lunar and planetary science objective. It's the oldest basin in the solar system. If we can get the right age constraints on that basin, it can help us anchor the chronology for the entire solar system. And so crew observing things like they did with OHM, where they can say, with my eyes, I can see this distinction, which can ultimately tell us that future observations of high priority landing sites could tell us something similar. This is how we start to really bite away at these really, really fundamental science questions that impact not just our understanding of the moon, but how our own planet has evolved over time.
Mark Kirkman with NSF. This is for Rick. While we have you here, I'd like to drill down a little bit on entry day a little more. Sounds like weather in the primary recovery zone is looking favorable, but can you walk through, as we approach EI and pass EI, what DES capability you have, what kind of cross range and downrange capability you have, when you committed to that landing zone? And also, with this thermally benign entry you're going to fly, do you still expect to exceed Apollo 10's? I know you don't know about that stuff, but we do.
That's all right. You can still keep asking the questions, and we'll go follow up, and we'll find the answers. I do not have the answer offhand about the Apollo 10 speed record, so we'll have to get that back to you tomorrow. And tomorrow I'm actually going to provide a lot of detail about the sequence of events for entry, as I'm the entry flight director for Friday evening splashdown. But with respect to your particular question about entry interface, we can select a new landing site as late as entry interface. We would prefer to not do that. We like to give ourselves a little bit of margin, but we can adjust the latitude and longitude of the site, and the spacecraft will fly to those coordinates so long as we get that command up before entry interface. So we're going to make a decision far in advance of entry interface to know where the splashdown site will be, because our top priority is to ensure that when Integrity and her crew of 4 splash down, that we have the recovery forces right nearby to help get them out and get them back to the recovery ship. So we have about a 475 nautical mile range. I can't do that conversion. But 475 miles of ocean within which we can select the most acceptable weather. And as you said, weather near San Diego looks favorable, so I'm optimistic that we'll be able to land close to the shore.
Tom Clark with Sky News. First of all, congratulations on the flyby and breathtaking images, and thanks for doing this too. There's been a lot of focus on the toilet, but I'm looking to get a kind of overall perspective on how happy you've been with Ryan and the European service model. What are you definitely going to have to fix before you fly it again? And how confident are you looking ahead to
question? Talked about how the Orion is performing, and it's performing spectacularly. I have to tell you, our Orion team is so pleased with really everything, the way that it's performing. The engines, the manual control that we heard us talk about several times, that The crew have just gone over and over about how well that's performing, how nicely the Orion crew module is handling. The service module, again, providing everything that we need. Yeah, we've had a couple of challenges, but overall, I mean, I think they're pretty minor in the whole grand scheme of things. The hardware itself performing extremely well. We're really looking forward to turning this around and flying again in a year, and then again a year after that. I think this hardware is really spectacular, and we're really looking forward to doing this more often. We're going to get the toilet figured out. The toilet is actually functioning perfectly. It's the drain, the ability to vent the wastewater. And as Rick said earlier, as soon as we get this down on the ground, we'll be able to get inside, and we will get to the root of that.
Hi, Lisa Grossman from Science News. This is especially for Kelsey, but actually for all of you. The astronauts, they used a lot of really fun analogies and descriptors for the features on the moon they were seeing. Did any stand out for you as favorites?
Oh, of like the analogies they used to describe lunar features? Yes, I liked the handprint, and that actually, we had a team working overnight to figure out exactly what they meant. They found it this morning. They were very excited to figure out exactly what they were talking about. I think, we train them, totally blunt, we train them to describe it like they see it. Tell us what's to you and how you can communicate it back to us. And so I think Christina delivered on that ask when she described a feature as looking like a wound. We do agree. I'm not sure it was my favorite lunar descriptor I heard yesterday, but it was evocative, and she's right, it did indeed look like a wound. And I was also really resonating with the way that several of the crew members were trying to, in the spirit of wanting to have a scientific dialogue, right? They had science questions they were trying to answer, and they were asking us some pretty sophisticated questions real time. And so to bring us with them on what they were seeing, the way that they were cluing us in to how they were moving across the moon by saying, take this feature, draw a line from that to this, and then continue going, and this is the feature we're looking at. Help us use that as a waypoint. It was an incredibly impactful way to have our team be ready to very quickly provide them with answers to the science questions, which is, again, important, not just because, of course, we want to support our crew at the moon, but when we can respond quickly and understand what they're looking at, it maximizes science, because we immediately ask the follow-up question and have them burrow in even deeper on those multiple working hypotheses. So the descriptions are not just great to clue us into what they're seeing, but it really helps us in real time maximize the science we're getting out of, in this case, a 7-hour flyby.
I'd like to on one of my favorite, it wasn't actually a lunar observation, but it was during the eclipse, and they were looking at the planets that could be seen. You could see Mercury, Mars, and Saturn, and Venus on the other side.
Yeah.
But they're looking at the planets, and I can't remember who said it, said one of them looks kind of red. And Kelsey's observation was, that's Mars, you're looking at your future. And I thought that was spectacular.
Only have time for a couple more questions, so I'll pass it over to you, Jonathan. We'll do one more.
Thank you. Jonathan Seri with Fox News. I would love to know about the logistics that went into the ship-to-ship call. If you could explain in layman's terms, how did it work out? And perhaps more importantly, what was the symbolic impact of that call?
So the logistics, we have done a number of public affairs events on integrity throughout the mission. We do them multiple times a week on the space station, and everything goes through. So the data comes through the Deep Space Network, Jet Propulsion Laboratory over to Houston. We have audio and video technicians here in Mission Control who can reconfigure the routes for the data and send it to the appropriate destination. We send new public affairs events down from the ISS through the tracking and data relay satellite system. And so that's something we do all the time. It's just a matter of connecting the two wires. So logistics were really quite easy, despite the distances.
I was in the flight control room this morning for that call, and something I observed that I didn't anticipate. Of course, we're expecting the crew joy at talking and connecting to each other, but looking around the room at the other flight controllers, and actually the gallery was open for other FOD employees to observe. This is a team sport. So many people, thousands of people work to enable this, and seeing the joy on everybody's faces as these two missions flying at the same time had this moment of connection is going to stay with me as a moment of inspiration from this mission.
Yeah, and I would just add, in terms of being symbolic, it is certainly a step in the right direction. Began with a single person in a Mercury spacecraft, and we progressed to 2 spacecraft at one time. Now we've got an international space station while a spacecraft is coming back from the moon. This is progress. We talk a lot about, what is an interesting KPI, the number of people living and working in space. We want to see that number grow. So hopefully in the not too distant future, we've got communication going on between our moon base, their colleagues that are orbiting above them in a lander, relaying back maybe to other colleagues on an international or future commercial space station. These are all steps in the right direction for the exciting future that many of us were probably imagined as children and we're trying to bring into reality.
We're going to do last question.
Hi, Dr. Allison McGraw, mysterious meteorites from here in Texas for Lunar Science League Young. Are there going to be any science data available of perhaps the color data for the impact flashes or trajectory directions they came from?
I asked the crew about that this morning. Any color? How long did they last? Where were they? And Reed and Jeremy, as I was talking to them, had their crew tablets out and they were making annotations and sketches on what they saw. They did just report this morning in our conversation that they didn't observe any color to them and that they were very, very brief, but they did provide sketches on whereabout they saw them. And so again, like I said, we're going to use the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter to try to, track to those features and try to identify what they saw. Trajectory is going to be hard, but Reconnaissance Orbiter data can help us pull that out. What we really wanted to do before the crew, splashed down and got distracted with all of the things they're going to be doing here was capture that nuance before it got overcome by a lot of other mission events. So we were able to capture a lot more detail this morning in my conversation with them, and the LRO team off to the races.
Great. With that, thank you for joining us today for our mission status briefing. We will have another briefing tomorrow. Until then, you can continue to follow along with the mission 24/7 on NASA's YouTube channel, and we will leave you with these beautiful images captured by Integrity.
back to the Artemis mission control room here at Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, where teams continue monitoring all systems and the crew aboard the Orion spacecraft, the first flight of humans on this spacecraft. The crew is having a little bit of a quieter day today. They woke up at 10:35 a.m. Central Time, got into their post period, and then had to talk to the International Space Station crew. Following that brief encounter, they stepped into their post-flyby conference with science lead Kelsey Young. Just saw her in our mission status briefing. Since then, the crew has had some opportunity to speak with their families and exercise a little bit too. We are targeting the RTC burn this afternoon. That's Return Trajectory Correction 1. This helps fine-tune our flight path for Orion and its crew to come splash down on Earth. We are now 3 days, 2 hours, and 9 minutes from our initially targeted splashdown time. We're looking at a visualization of the spacecraft. Now 48,670 miles from the moon and 228,090 miles from Earth, continuing to grow closer. You can keep up with this data at any time by visiting nasa.gov/track-Artemis. Coming up shortly, we expect the crew to have their intermediate burn targeting conference. At that time, the team will load up the latest burn plans aboard the spacecraft. The burn we're expecting this afternoon will be small, especially in comparison to the translunar injection burn that put us on this trajectory. Trajectory correction burns are using RCS, or Reaction Control System, thrusters on the spacecraft. Much smaller thrusters with much less power. OMS, or Orbital Maneuvering System engine, that we use to propel us around the moon and bring us back home. This is a live view from the spacecraft looking at the service module. That large nozzle is the OMS engine. We do not intend to use it again in the mission, having completed that transsection burn. return trajectory correction burn with the crew members aboard the Orion spacecraft. As you heard Commander Reed Wiseman call down earlier, they have only eaten about 40% of the food allotted to them for this mission. The food the 4 astronauts eat plays a key role in maintaining their health and ensuring they can perform their mission objectives to the best of their abilities. Let's learn a little bit more about how to eat in space.
Around the moon meal.
Around the moon meal. What would you eat? Cheese?
Oh my gosh. That's clever. What do you think?
All right, go ahead. My name is Christina Cook.
And I'm Jeremy Hansen. We're crew members on the Artemis 2 mission flying around the moon. And when we fly around the moon, of course, we're going to be taking some food with us.
That's right. This is how to eat in space. Here we are in what we call our food lab at NASA Johnson Space Center. We come in here quite often, sample space food. The neat thing about the food collection is it is so diverse. Different entrees that you wouldn't imagine can be hydrated and actually in space are fair game. And it's pretty awesome.
We came in for Artemis. We got about halfway through the first session. We're not really sure we're going to have time on board to warm this stuff up. We talked a lot about day one. It's a long day. Hours before we leave the launch pad on our way to space. And then when we get to space, we have a lot of important events. Just did a sim yesterday where lunch is scheduled.
Midday meal.
Yeah, midday meal for all 4 of us. So those would be great moments, I think, in our mission to have prep some food, sit down or float as a crew and have a joint meal.
For sure.
I think that'd be fun.
My name is Shulei Wu. I'm the food system manager for ISS and Artemis. The food lab at Johnson Space Center, that's where we make package space food and also where we're making all the food for Artemis. Food is a big part for our crew members, provide the nutrition, the calorie for crew members, but also boosting. That's very important. There is always other steps, strict steps for us to follow to making sure the food we provide are consistent and meet all the food safety, nutritional requirements, and most important, also need the other strategy always promote the variety, because everybody's food preference can be different. Therefore, the more variety we can have, better of the astronaut group.
They bring out these little tiny samples of each
things.
food, and you're like, oh my gosh, I thought we were having lunch. And then by the end, there's so many space foods, and every time you leave,
I'm so full, I'm in pain.
and you just rate them like, I love this, I don't want to eat it, I'd eat it if you tell me I need it. Because what the food lab does is they take all your preferences, but they're also like good parents and they're like, a balanced diet.
Exactly. They were like, no, you can't have mac and cheese every day, Christina. Sorry.
I'm Wyatt McKinley. I'm a flight controller and a crew instructor for Artemis 2. We're here at the Space Vehicle Mock-Up Facility at Johnson Space Center. We're inside the Orion mock-up from crew training Artemis 2. On the Orion vehicle, crew is able to heat up their food using our briefcase-style food. The food is held in contact with the central heater plate by these springs so that it can warm up and they can have a delicious meal. Much of the food and drink that's on Orion is rehydratable. And so crew at our potable water dispenser fill up their food and drink, and then at that point, you go ahead and pop it in.
I'm kind of envisioning maybe one person putting the stuff in and out, kind of tossing it out to everyone when it's done. Or maybe if we're not scheduled together, you're just on your own over there, popping something in. Or maybe just in your 2 minutes of free time between, you're kind of getting it ready.
Eating together really resonates with me. I think it's just a human thing to break bread together, enjoy that necessary thing you have to do, the thing you should be grateful for. And so doing that as a group, as a family, has always been meaningful for me.
Represents togetherness and something a little out of the ordinary. You don't necessarily get to have those meals with everybody in your life, but you are sharing a meal, especially during breakfast, lunch, and dinner with a group of people. That means something. It's like a camping trip.
Go ahead. Down and to the left, line 17, the DAP load is 3 for burn maneuver. intersection. The delta V tote now 1.4 feet per second. The TGO is unchanged at 15 seconds.
Good, go ahead.
Attitude, yaw, 154. Pitch, 26. Roll, 287.
Copy, go ahead.
And the last bit's the delta V, X, minus 1.2, Y, 0.6, Z, minus 0.6.
We copy all. Thanks for that clear read up. And we see that our next step is to run 2-level targeter.
We concur and we'll be watching. And just a reminder that we're not pressurizing the tanks before this burn, so we're going to do it in blowdown.
Copy blowdown, and understand we have a go to complete step 9 on board, even though the burn execution steps show it as a skip.
Checking. Oh, good catch, Christina. We missed that. That should not say skip. We do want you to do step 9 for intermediate targeting.
Copy all. We will do it and chat with you after. Thank you.
Roger.
That was Capcom and Love here at Mission Control Houston, a fellow NASA astronaut. NASA's Chris Cook aboard the Orion spacecraft. The crew aboard the spacecraft is preparing for their return trajectory correction burn. It's the first of these return trajectory correction burns, reported to be a 1.4 foot per second delta V burn. Again, we are expecting that return trajectory correction burn tonight around 7:03 p.m. Central Time. These small return trajectory correction burns. With that, if you wouldn't mind, just given the rest of the burn execution steps a once-over, we think they all look nominal from here on out, but we'd feel better. Let us know if you see any other deltas. Thank you.
We will run an additional check and call if we find any other problems.
Perfect, thanks. Such a fantastic view coming from a solar array camera on Orion, looking back at all of us here on Earth. Currently, the spacecraft is 27,756 miles away from our home planet. Orion is now 49,168 miles away from the moon. Earlier today, the spacecraft exited the sphere of influence. That's when the pull of gravity is strongest on the spacecraft.
Christina, we have double-checked all of the steps in the pad for the execution, and we found no more mistakes.
You guys rock. Thanks.
And Christina, while we've got you, we have increased the fan speed, and we're wondering if you want us to keep it at this level for the next exercise session.
We feel it, and yes, please.
We will do that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. flight control room at Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. Current flight director Jeff Radigan leading all of the teams around the room, monitoring Orion's systems. This is Flight Day 7, following launch on April 1st of Orion atop the Space Launch System spacecraft at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. This live view is coming from Orion, looking back at all of us on Earth, or should I say looking to all of us on Earth, as that is where the spacecraft is headed following yesterday's lunar flyby.
Enter Houston for the timeline.
get a live view of the Earth from the Orion spacecraft. We are now 5 days, 3 hours, and 39 minutes into the Artemis 2, first flight of humans aboard Orion. Crew aboard the spacecraft has been working on the targeting plan for the upcoming RT-1 burn. That's Return Trajectory Correction 1, a fine-tuning maneuver to keep us on a straight and narrow path on the way to the Pacific Ocean.
Terry Houston, voice check, Orion Earth 1.
We have you loud and clear, Stan.
We have you the same. Did you hear 2 earlier calls for timeline about 3 minutes ago? Okay. We had just tried to get your attention for some timeline things. It looks like there was some uplink going on elsewhere in the system. We're going to chase that down. For the timeline, can you please give us a status on the RHC install and the docking cam install?
Yeah, we're just processing the docking cam install right this moment. Probably be another 2 minutes before it's up. And we're assuming we need to disregard that. And then the RC, we knew it was in the procedure earlier. It's prepped, not quite up yet, but it's in position, so we're good with the RC.
If you're happy, we're happy, and copy the docking cam. Next, at the end of your midday meal, we've got a scheduled flight director crew conference. The vehicle looks great. We don't think we need that conference, and if you agree, we can cancel.
Okay, crew's good up here. We can go ahead and cancel that.
All right, and finally, we saw your intermediate targeting complete successfully, and solution looks good from here.
Okay, we concur, Stan. Appreciate it.
That's it for now. Enjoy your lunch.
We most certainly will enjoy this very rare lunch out in deep space.
will take a look.
We are live in the Artemis Mission Control Room here at Johnson Space Center in Texas with a mission elapsed time of 5 days, 23 hours, and 45 minutes into the flight of Orion on Artemis 2, the first flight of humans aboard the Orion spacecraft. Just heard some calls while the teams are planning for the upcoming return trajectory correction burn, and the crew has been given a go to get into their midday meal. While here in the flight control room, I am joined by Trey Perryman. He is the Orion Mission Evaluation. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, good afternoon, Leah.
Tell me a little bit about you and your role.
Sure. During this mission, I'm called the Orion MER lead, the Orion Mission Evaluation lead. And so this is a team of engineers, a large team of engineers who have a critical role in the success of this mission. We are responsible for really being the engineering source of knowledge base for the mission. This is a large team comprised of the engineers who designed, built, assembled this spacecraft, and then processed this with our KSC team members before launch. During the mission itself, we are here in the Mission Control Center, and we provide that expertise to the operational teams, the flight ops team, the launch team before we lift it off. And my role is to lead this organization, this team of engineers, and then during the mission, report out the findings, the observations we have to our leadership team, to the mission management team and others.
What's the configuration like in the MER? Is it consoles like this? Are you staffed 24/7? Can you break that down?
Sure, yeah. So the MER itself is really a combination of different functions across the spacecraft.
Copy. Acoustic monitor on batteries, and we have checked and are getting good data from the docking camera. Thanks for that work.
Ray knows the rules, that we
That's
always
right.
let the astronauts talk first.
That's very important. I grew up in. I was telling Leah, I grew up in this room here as a flight controller on the space shuttle program and ISS assembly missions, and so I definitely have learned that protocol. So bear with me as I explain this. But up in the MER, this is a collection of focus areas. So we have we call them consoles, just like we have in the flight control room here, and these are really representatives of different engineering functions or expertise. And so we have a console, for example, for the propulsion systems. Roles, and we talk and compatible, And so we talk with one another through the mission. So our flight controllers here and the MER consoles talk regularly, every day, all through the shifts, about what's going on in the spacecraft components. And then our team upstairs is led by MER managers, so they're responsible for one shift to the next in the MER. This MER supports round the clock, and just as the flight director does in this room. And so our MER managers and the flight directors coordinate as required.
Let's talk about preparation a little bit. So I know that we participate in sims here in the flight control team. How does the MER prepare for a mission like this?
Right, very similar. So the MER team, we're different than flight controllers. And so where the flight controllers, this is their bread and butter operation, is what they do primarily. The engineers in the MER are also very good because they draw upon their day job of designing and understanding, really qualifying the system, testing, evaluating, improving. And so for the MER team, our training really begins with what we do outside of the mission, pre-flight, ahead of time, and understanding this vehicle, defining what the vehicle will need to do during the missions. And so when it came to really I think your question is really about how do we actually specifically prepare for this mission. We began in January of last year, and we formed the team and identified who would be on the team, and then participated in dozens of simulations with the launch team out at KSC, and then also here at mini sims with the flight ops team. So exercising team communication within our own MER team, and also communicating with the flight controllers, communicating with the launch control team. A lot of the simulations we do stress, scenarios, which are useful for learning about the systems, but also learning how do we resolve in a timely manner, how do we understand the condition of the vehicle and make sure that it is ready to continue to fly and successfully return the crew home.
Fantastic. Well, let's talk a little bit about yesterday. So we had Lunar Flyby Day.
Yes.
What was the energy like in the mission evaluation room?
It was a fun day. So, and a day, I think, full of emotions. I think for many who witnessed yesterday, probably around the world, we all shared similar emotions and feelings about the gravity and the momentous occasion that was. When Jeremy was calling down and spoke about those craters, and naming those two specific craters, I don't think there was a dry eye in the room. I mean, silence. So most of the team upstairs, like here, are wearing headsets, but we had a lot of extra visitors. So we had speakers on, but you can just hear very clearly Jeremy coming through the speakers we had up there. Very impactful. And then as we approached Paralone, the altitude of closest approach to the lunar surface, lots of excitement. Immense joy as we led up to the Earth set before we went into that eclipse period and loss of signal period. Before launch, the crew members came out and visited the MER and talked with us and gave us patches, those double-sided patches that they decided, where one side is a picture of the Earth with the moon in the distance, and then the other side is different with the moon in close up and then the Earth in the distance. So we did what they had asked us to do. And so at the moment of Paralone, we all had a little ceremony of or activity of flipping the patches. And so immense joy, excitement. It was pretty fun. And then as we knew we would get signal back as Orion continued to fly on the other side of the moon, and we knew we would get comm back with the Earth, intense focus. Really wanted to make sure, what is that vehicle looking like once we got comm back with it.
Sounds like we're going through some similar things in both of these rooms.
I'm
you
sure.
know, when the craters were named, it was a moment of silence in here as well. It was very, very touching. And we also have those double-sided patches, and we got to show those yesterday on the broadcast and had our own moment of getting to turn those around. So it was a very fun day here as well, and I'm glad to hear that you had that in the MER too.
Yeah.
So now that we're through the MER flyby, we're officially on the journey home. How do you feel about the rest of this mission and coming down and coming splashdown?
Yeah, this mission is not over until we get the crew back. So the MER team has extreme focus right now. There are a lot of things that the crew members are doing themselves in the cabin to prepare for this journey home, and we are also watching the spacecraft, and it's really mindful that we are. I'll wait, Hector.
it is showing us a bunch of noise and spikes. We're wondering if something is bumping against it.
We were just setting up for a photo in the cabin, but I do not think we have hit it. So that would be abnormal. Christina's checking it. There is one charging cable near it that she's re-anchoring now, but nothing is really in the way of that thing.
All right, copy, Reed. Actually, that's a helpful report. We might have been getting some interference with that cable. We'll keep an eye on it.
We just heard a call from the Board Orion, from the Capcom Stan Love here to Board Orion about potential signal from the smoke detector, and it may have been interference due to a nearby cable, and the team's going to keep their eye on it, but no alarms here. Trey, we were talking about the journey home now that...
Seeing that noise on the smoke detector, so we're suspecting interference from that cable.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Just what we were hoping to hear. We were talking about the MUR, and now we're on our way home, and the mission is really not over. It's definitely not over until we have the crew back safely. So what's the focus like right there now?
Right, we have a couple of trajectory correction burns coming home, and so the MUR team is looking at systems that would be involved in that and the performance of that burn, of those burns, to really make sure we're hitting the right entry interface conditions. I mean, that's really where, for this spacecraft, the rubber meets the road in terms of recovery and returning home. You need to hit that target so that the rest of the spacecraft can go through the atmosphere, open parachutes, and finally successfully splash down. So the MUR team is looking at that. We're worked through a handful of different different anomalous conditions on the spacecraft. I think the crew is doing very hard in the space, working through different things in the spacecraft and their own day, their own schedule. And so we're watching that, but really all eyes towards entry interface.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing them under good main parachute flashing down.
Absolutely.
And one last thing, I'm very honored to get to tell this story, but I want to make sure people know that the story goes so far beyond just this room and the crew and have anybody that you want to give a shout out to.
Yeah, so the MUR team upstairs in this building, we have dozens of people every shift, round the clock. But we have other locations. So we have people, I'd like to say hello to the people outside of this building that support the team that I'm responsible for. So we have dozens of people in Denver at a facility Lockheed Martin has. We have dozens of people